The Xin-3 fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of Earth's solar system, with the confidence of apex predators, entering familiar hunting grounds there. Ships gleamed like obsidian daggers against the void, each vessel larger than any structure humanity had ever built in Space Ambassador Commander. Vethkel stood on the bridge of the flagship Dominion's Will, his 4 eyes scanning the primitive planet ahead with barely concealed contempt for 3,000 cycles. The Xin-3 Collective had ruled this sector of the galaxy without challenge, for species bound by blood and iron. Conquering, subjugating, incorporate 47 lesser species now serve the Collecto in various capacities from labor to tribute this. Blue World would be the 48th scout reports had been clear. Primitive electromagnetic communications. Chemical propulsion barely reaching their own moon. No unified planetary government, a fractured species. Playing its civilization while remaining blind to the greater cosmos. Vethkel's mandibles clicked in satisfaction as his tactical officer reported the locations of human satellites and the single occupied station orbiting their world target, the largest. Communications relay, he commanded, destroy. The weapons officer hesitated for merely a fraction of a moment before complying. A lance of superheated plasma crossed the distance in seconds. The satellite became an expanding cloud of molten metal and vaporized components in Earth. Chaos erupted across every space agency and military command center. International Space Station detected the incoming Xin-3 fleet. Moments before communications, satellites began going dark. Secretary General Maria Santos was pulled from a climate summit in Geneva and rushed to an emergency session of the Security Council, the council chamber filled with representatives from every major nation, their faces pale as they watched the alien ships take positions in high-orbit first contact protocols. Carefully developed over decades of speculation. Seemed painfully inadequate for this scenario. The aliens were not broadcasting greetings or mathematical proofs of intelligence. They were demonstrating. Power Vethkel's message came 12 hours after the destruction of the satellite. It appeared simultaneously on every screen capable of receiving a signal, translated into every major human language by technology that made Earth's best computers seem like counting beads. Primitive inhabitants of the third planet, the message began, and Vethkel's image filled billions of screens. His chitinous face and predatory eyes struck fear into hearts. Across the globe, you have been evaluated by the Xin-3 Collective and found suitable for integration. You will submit to our authority and accept classification as a labor class species. You will provide raw materials, manufacturing capacity, and biological labor as determined by collective needs in exchange. You will receive protection and limited technological advancement. Under our guidance, this is not a negotiation. This is inevitability. Secretary General Santos felt her stomach drop as she listened to the translation around her. Diplomats from Russia, China, the United States, and dozens of other nations sat in stunned silence. However, Vethkel continued, we recognize you may require time to overcome your primitive instincts. Toward resistance, we are not without mercy. You have 72 of your hours to signal your acceptance. Refusal or silence will be interpreted as defiance. The transmission ended for a long moment. Nobody in the Security Council chamber spoke then. Everyone spoke at once. The next 3 days became a blur of emergency sessions, military deployments, and desperate diplomatic attempts. Santos led a team that drafted 17 different response messages, each trying to find some middle ground between submission and suicide. They asked for more time. They requested clarification on terms. They proposed alternative arrangements. Every message went unanswered. Meanwhile, Vethkel watched humanity's frantic activity with the detached interest of an entomologist observing an anthill before destroying it. As analysts reported electromagnetic chatter suggesting military mobilization laughable. What could these primitives possibly field against ships that cross star systems? On the second day, a delegation of human diplomats requested a face-to-face meeting. Vethkel considered the request such. Meetings were customary when incorporating new species, if only to formalize their surrender and make examples of their leaders. He agreed. selecting the human space station as a neutral meeting ground. It would demonstrate collective magnanimity, while also showing the humans how utterly outmatched they were. The diplomatic shuttle launched from Earth, carrying Santos and 5 other representatives from different nations and international bodies. Physicist Dr. James Okonkwo included for his knowledge of theoretical technologies. Ambassador Liu Wei from China, General Thomas Morrison from the United States military, Dar Amira Farah from the African Union, and Yuki Tanaka, a representative from the newly formed Coalition for Human Unity, docked at the International Space Station, where 17 astronauts and cosmonauts waited, prepared to serve as neutral witnesses to whatever came. Next Vethkal shuttle arrived 6 hours later. The alien ambassador brought 4 guards, each carrying weapons that hummed with barely contained energy. The meeting began in the station's largest module. Hurriedly cleared and prepared for this historic encounter, Santos opened with careful words about mutual understanding and peaceful coexistence. Sithal interrupted her before she finished her second sentence. "You misunderstand your position," he said, his translator rendering his words in cold, precise English. "The collective does not negotiate with lesser species. We dictate terms, you comply." Dr. Okonkwo leaned forward, his scientific curiosity overriding his fear. "What gives you the right to make such demands?" Vethkal's 4 eyes focused on the physicist with what might have been amusement. "Right?" he repeated. "We possess the capacity. Capacity is the only right that matters in the cosmos. You have 72 hours to accept reality. Refusal means we will demonstrate why resistance is futile." General Morrison, his military bearing rigid, spoke carefully. "And if we need more time to prepare our people, this is a decision that affects billions. Then you waste what little time you have." Vethkal responded. He stood, indicating the meeting was over. As he turned to leave, Santos made one last attempt. "We're asking for dialogue, not confrontation, please. Give us a chance to." Vethkal spun with shocking speed. His hand moved in a gesture to one of his guards before anyone could react. One of the alien weapons discharged. The station's hull remained intact, but the weapon's focused energy burst killed all 17 astronauts instantly. The diplomatic delegation watched in horror as bodies drifted. In the sudden silence, Santos felt her voice die in her throat. Vethkal looked at her directly, his alien features unreadable, but his intent crystal clear. "That is the cost of wasting my time with requests and pleas," he said. 17 lives lost because you asked for chances. Instead of accepting inevitability, you have 54 of your hours remaining. Use them wisely." The Zinthri delegation departed, leaving the 6 human diplomats alone with the dead Santos, floated in zero gravity, staring at the bodies of people she had known, people who had families waiting on Earth below. Dar Farah was weeping silently. General Morrison's face had gone pale with rage. The shuttle ride back to Earth passed in traumatized silence when they landed. Santos went directly to the Emergency Security Council session. Her report was brief and devastating. The council chamber erupted in outrage, fear, and confusion. Some called for immediate military responsors, advocated surrender to prevent further loss of life. Santos listened to them all before speaking quietly into her microphone. "They killed 17 people to make a point," she said. "They think we're insects to be crushed if we don't immediately obey." She looked around the chamber at faces representing billions of humans. "They've made a terrible mistake," she continued. "They think they've frightened us into submission. They don't understand what they've actually done." General Morrison nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. "They've given us a reason to fight," he said. Santos met his gaze. "They've given us more than that," she replied. "They've given us 72 hours to prepare, and they've shown us they view negotiation as weakness." Around the chamber, the tone began to shift. Fear remained, but it was hardening into something else, something cold and determined. Secreted General Santos stood before the Assembly of Nations and spoke words that would echo through history. "We asked for peace," she said. "They answered with murder. We offered Cooperation, they demanded slavery. Very well, let's show them what happens when you mistake human restraint for human weakness. The vote was nearly unanimous. Humanity would not surrender across the planet. Military forces mobilized, scientists abandoned their regular work to analyze the alien technology. Every space agency, every defense contractor, every research institution began sharing data. Old rivalries and political divisions didn't disappear, but they became secondary to survival in orbit. Vethkel waited with absolute confidence. His fleet remained in position, weapons ready for the inevitable, a moment when these primitives either capitulated or made the fatal mistake of resistance. He never imagined a third option, that humanity might use those 72 hours not to accept their fate, but to change it. The Xinthri occupation fleet arrived in Earth's orbit exactly 72 hours after Vethkel's ultimatum. With the certainty of a cosmic inevitability, 200 warships arranged themselves in a blockade formation that would prevent any vessel from leaving the planet's gravity well. Call stood on his bridge, expecting to receive humanity's unconditional surrender at any moment. Instead, his communications officer reported something unexpected. Dearth was responding, but the messages were confused, contradictory, and bureaucratic. One message claimed that Secretary General Santos had authority to negotiate, but needed approval from individual nations. Another message from the more United States requested a formal treaty structure. A third from China asked for technical specifications on integration procedures. Russia wanted clarification on labor classifications. African Union demanded representation in any agreement. Vethel's mandibles clicked in irritation. This was typical of primitive species, too fractured to act decisively, even in the face of their own extinction. His analysts assured him this was normal behavior for species without unified command structures. They're stalling, his tactical officer observed. Perhaps Vethkel agreed, but to what purpose? They have no weapons that can harm us, no technology that poses any threat. Let them waste time with their primitive politics. Soon enough, they'll realize resistance is impossible. What Vethko didn't know was that humanity's apparent disorganization was entirely deliberate. In bunkers deep beneath NORAD, in command centers under Beijing, and facilities hidden across Russia and Europe and Africa, humanity was engaged in the most concentrated scientific and military effort in its history. Every message sent to the Xinthri was carefully crafted to buy more time, while appearing genuine. Doro Conquo worked with a team of physicists analyzing every scrap of data collected. From the alien ships, they studied energy signatures, propulsion systems, weapon discharges, and communication protocols. The physicist had commandeered the world's most powerful supercomputers and put them to work on a single problem. Find a weakness. Their shields operate on a rotating frequency, he explained to General Morrison during one briefing. But there's a pattern, a mathematical sequence they repeat. If we can predict the sequence, we can time our attacks to strike when specific frequencies are at their lowest efficiency. Meanwhile, computer scientists and hackers from every nation pooled their expertise. The Xinthri communications had to be decoded, translated, and analyzed. If the aliens relied on networked systems like humanity did, perhaps those systems could be infiltrated. A young programmer from India named Priya Sharma made the breakthrough there. Language is structured like code, she explained to her. International team, every command has an embedded verification signature. But the signature algorithm is based on predictable variables. Can spoof it. The military angle fell to General Morrison and his counterparts from other nations. Traditional warfare was impossible. Humanity had no ships that could match Xinthri vessels in direct combat. Asymmetric warfare, that was something humans understood intimately. We don't need to destroy their entire fleet. Morrison explained to the Joint Chiefs of Staff, we need to hurt them badly enough that they question whether conquering Earth is worth the cost. The plan came together piece by piece. Weapons were deployed in secret. Railguns, hidden on the lunar surface. Electromagnetic pulse satellites disguised as debris. Kinetic impactors and orbital trajectories that appeared natural. Most importantly, Priya Sharma's team prepared their digital attack. They had isolated the Zin-3 command codes and written a virus, specifically designed to exploit the aliens' networked systems when Vethkal finally lost patience with humanity's bureaucratic delays. He decided to force the issue, bring the flagship into low orbit over their largest population center. He commanded we'll receive their surrender in person. Above their capital, the Dominions will descended through Earth's atmosphere, a massive vessel that blotted out the sun over New York City below. Millions of people watched in terror as the alien ship settled into position. Vethkal prepared his formal acceptance speech. Ready to accept Secretary General Santos's inevitable capitulation instead? Santos sent one final message. Ambassador Commander Vethkal. You asked for our answer? Here it is, the trap sprung. Every hidden weapon humanity had prepared fired simultaneously. On the lunar surface launched tungsten rods at a significant fraction of light speed. The kinetic projectiles struck 3 Zin-3 ships in orbit, punching through their shields before the aliens even detected the launch. Electromagnetic pulse satellites activated, flooding the space around Earth with interference that disrupted Zin-3 sensors and communications. Virus Priya Sharma's team had uploaded through every communication channel the Zin-3 had left open for humanity's surrender spread through the alien network like wildfire, turning automated systems against their operators' point defense weapons on. The Zin-3 ships suddenly targeted their own fleet navigation systems, reported false collision warnings. Life support began cycling. Erratically, most devastating of all, the flagship's shields dropped for exactly 4 seconds. For seconds was all humanity needed. Day-coordinated strike of conventional missiles, launched from submarines, aircraft, and ground installations, converged on the Dominion's Wiltha. Alien ship's armor was formidable, but without shields, it was vulnerable. Explosions rippled across the hull. The flagship lurched, its graceful descent becoming an uncontrolled fall. Vethkal clung to his command chair as his ship died around him. Emergency systems kicked in, barely managing to stabilize the vessel before it crashed into the Atlantic Ocean around Earth. The Zin-3 fleet descended into chaos. Ships collided as their navigation systems fed them false data. Automated weapons fired at imaginary threats. Communication between vessels became impossible as their networks crashed and rebooted repeatedly. In the confusion, humanity's hidden orbital weapons picked off isolated ships with brutal efficiency. General Morrison watched from his command bunker as the tactical display showed Zin-3 vessels breaking formation. All units maintain fire discipline. He ordered target ships that are isolated or damaged. Don't waste ammunition on ships with full shields. The battle lasted 6 hours when it ended. 37 Zin-3 ships were destroyed or disabled. The remainder retreated beyond the moon's orbit. Regrouping in Vethkal, rescued from his sinking flagship by a support vessel, stared at the tactical reports in disbelief. These primitives had hurt the collective, actually hurt them. Should have been impossible. His communications officer, one of the few who survived the flagship's destruction, approached hesitantly. Ambassador Commander, we're receiving a transmission from the human leadership. Vethkal's hands trembled with rage as he activated the display. Secretary General Santos appeared, standing in what looked like a military command center. Her face was composed but hard. Ambassador Commander Vethkal, she began, you came to our world expecting easy conquest. You killed 17 of our people to demonstrate your power. Now, we've demonstrated ours behind her. General Morrison stood with arms crossed. Other figures filled the room, military officers, scientists, diplomats, all watching Vethkal with expressions devoid of fear. This is your one chance to leave our system peacefully. Santos continued, take your remaining ships and go. Tell your collective that Earth is not interested in their protection or their authority. If you return with more ships, we'll destroy more ships. If you escalate, we'll escalate. We don't want war, but we're clearly willing to wage it. Vethkal found his voice, though it came out as a hiss. You think this minor victory means anything? The collective commands thousands of ships, armies that have conquered empires. We'll return with such force that your primitive weapons won't even slow us down. Santos's expression didn't change. Then you'll lose thousands of ships instead of dozens. Is Earth worth that cost? Are we the species you called primitive and inferior, worth fighting a war of attrition against? She leaned forward, and Vethkel saw something in her eyes that chilled him, not fear or desperation, but cold calculation. Because I promise you, Ambassador Commander, we'll make you pay for every meter of ground you take. We'll make you regret that you ever found our little blue planet. The transmission ended. Vethkel stood in silence. His tactical officers waiting for orders. Everything he understood about warfare and conquest had been built on the assumption of technological and numerical superiority. The collective always had better weapons, better ships, better everything, but these humans had negated those advantages with deception, creativity, and a willingness to fight in ways the collective had never encountered. His communication officer interrupted his thoughts. Ambassador Commander, what should we report to the High Council? Vethkel considered his options. He could report that he'd encountered unexpected resistance and request reinforcements. That was the logical choice, the proper military response, but something about the humans' words troubled him. They didn't fight like any species the collective had ever subjugated. Those others had resisted from fear or honor, fighting until overwhelmed, but the humans had attacked with precision and planning. They'd hurt the collective intentionally. Measuring their response, what kind of species fought like that? Send a full report, he finally ordered. Include all tactical data and engagement records. The Zinthri High Council convened in the Grand Chamber on Zinthok Prime with all the ceremony befitting an empire of 3,000 cycles. For species united in conquest sat in their designated sections. The Zinthri themselves, with their chitinous forms and predatory intelligence. The massive Krell, who served as shock troops. The crystalline Vexnari, who managed communications and coordination. And the aquatic Drell, who handled logistical networks. High Commander Zalthar, supreme military authority of the collective, reviewed Vethkel's report with growing disbelief. A single world, he said, his voice echoing through the chamber. A primitive world that hasn't even mastered faster than light travel. Destroyed 37 of our vessels? Vethkel, summoned to defend his actions, stood before the council with as much dignity as his failure. Allowed. The humans are unlike any species we've encountered, he explained. They don't fight with honor or desperation, they fight with calculation. They laid traps, used deception, attacked our systems in ways we didn't anticipate. One of the Krell counselors rumbled its displeasure. Excuses from a commander who underestimated his opponent. The solution is simple. Overwhelming force, Zalthar agreed. Will assemble an armada of 2,000 ships. Will reduce their cities to ash and make an example that will terrify any other species considering resistance. The council voted unanimously for total. Warders went out across the collective's territory fleet. Groups were recalled from patrol. Routes and occupation duties, shipyards increased. Production military reserves were activated. The collective was mobilizing for its largest military operation in centuries, all to crush one stubborn planet. Meanwhile on Earth, humanity was engaged in its own mobilization. Dar Okonkwo's team worked around the clock in facilities across the globe they captured. Zinthri technology was providing insights that advanced human science by decades. Faster than light drive remained tantalizingly out of reach for perfect replication, but the physicists had been truthful about creating something functional. We're essentially building a very dangerous engine that breaks half the safety regulations in physics, he explained to the engineering teams. The Zinthri drives fold space cleanly and efficiently. Ours will be more like punching through space with a hammer. It'll be loud, unstable, and the ships might shake apart if we're unlucky. But it'll get us where we need to go. The first prototype was installed in a modified aircraft carrier that had been hastily converted for space operations. The USS Enterprise, renamed Terran Defiance, had its flight deck sealed, fusion reactors installed, and the experimental faster-than-light drive mounted where its island superstructure once stood. It was ugly, asymmetrical, and held together with welds that would make any shipwright weep. But when Dr. Okonkwo activated the drive for the first time, the ship vanished from Earth orbit and reappeared near Mars 12 minutes later. The test pilot, Commander Sarah Chen, reported that the journey felt like riding a rocket through an earthquake. But she and her crew survived. Intact production began immediately. Humanity couldn't match the collective's numbers or technology. but they could field enough ships to make a statement. 12 more vessels were converted. Naval carriers, cargo ships. Even a luxury cruise liner that became the troop transport Odyssey. Each ship received the experimental drive. Weapons cobbled together from captured Synthri technology and human innovation. And crews of volunteers who understood. They were sailing into almost certain death. General Morrison addressed the assembled crews before launch. The collective is coming with 2,000 ships. To wipe us out, he said. We can't stop them. With 12 vessels, so we're not going to try, he paused. Letting that sink in instead. We're going to hit them where they don't expect it. We're taking the war to Zinthok Prime. The plan was insane. Suicidal and absolutely human while the collective armada traveled toward Earth. The Terran retaliation fleet would use faster-than-light travel to bypass them entirely. Would strike the enemy's homeworld, cause as much damage as possible, and demonstrate that Earth wouldn't just defend itself, it would punch. Back Secretary General Santos had one last conversation with Commander Chen before the fleet departed. You understand, the collective might retaliate against Earth for this. Santos said if you strike their homeworld, they'll be enraged. Chen nodded, but they were already coming to destroy us, at least this way. We'll hurt them first. We'll show them that attacking Earth has consequences. Santos gripped the commander's hand. Make it count. The Terran retaliation fleet launched from hidden positions. Across the solar system, 12 ships activated their drives simultaneously, and space around Earth rippled as they vanished. The journey to Zinthok Prime took 6 days of hard travel. Drives performed better than expected. Though 2 ships suffered mechanical failures that required emergency repairs in deep space, the crews worked in shifts, sleeping in cramped quarters and eating rations. While their vessels hurtled through the void, Commander Chen used the time to drill her people on the attack plan. We hit fast and we hit hard, she repeated. Constantly orbital shipyards first, then communication relays, then military installations. We're not here to occupy or conquer. We're here to send a message. Navigation Officer Yuki Tanaka, the same diplomat who had witnessed the massacre at the space station, volunteered for the mission despite having no military training. She worked with Chen to identify targets based on intelligence gathered from captured Zinthri data. The Council Tower, she said, pointing to a structure on the planet's surface. It's their seat of government, if we can damage it without killing civilians. We'll humiliate them, Chen agreed. Precision strikes only. We're not monsters like Vethkal. The fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Zinthok system. The planet hung before them, a purple and green world surrounded by massive orbital installations. Hundreds of ships moved in traffic patterns around the shipyards. The collective had never imagined their homeworld might be attacked. Consequently, their defenses were minimal. All ships, Chen transmitted. Weapons-free, execute attack plan. The 12 human vessels dove toward their targets. The Terran Defiance led the assault on the primary shipyard, a massive structure that dwarfed the human ship. Chun's weapons officer unleashed everything they had: missiles adapted from nuclear warheads, railguns firing at maximum rate, and experimental energy weapons reverse-engineered from Zinthri technology. The shipyard's shields, designed to protect against debris and accidents rather than military assault, collapsed under the barrage's secondary. Explosions rippled through the structure as ammunition, stores and fuel depots ignited. 3 half-constructed warships broke free from their moorings and tumbled into the planet's gravity, while other human ships struck their assigned targets with similar precision. Communication satellites exploded in cascades of debris. Military bases on the planet's moons found themselves under bombardment from ships that appeared without warning. And then Commander Chen made her personal statement. Terran Defiance descended into low orbit directly above the Council Tower. Her weapons officer had loaded a special package, a single kinetic impactor. Nothing more than a telephone pole of tungsten with guidance fins. It wouldn't destroy the towerette, would just punch a very obvious hole through the top 3 floors. Chun gave the order. The impactor launched, accelerated by the ship's railgain, It struck the council tower with pinpoint accuracy, the top of the building, empty of people. Chen had made certain of that, collapsed in a shower of debris below. In the emergency bunker where the High Council had retreated, Zalthor watched security footage of the attack with horror. Human ships, crude and ugly but undeniably functional, were tearing apart his homeworld's defenses. How did they get here? He demanded. How do they have faster-than-light capability? His analysts had no answers. The humans had accomplished in months what should have taken generations worse. They'd done it specifically to attack Zinthok Prime while the Armada was en route to Earth. Recall the fleet. One counselor suggested, we need to defend our homeworld. No, Zalthor said. Watching another shipyard explode, that's what they want. They want us divided. Our forces split, their 12 ships against our entire military. He opened a channel to Commander Chen. Broadcasting on frequencies he knew the humans would be monitoring. Human Commander, Zalthor said. You've made your point. You've demonstrated capability we didn't expect. But you can't win this war. Your 12 ships against thousands withdraw now. And we can negotiate terms. Chun's face appeared on his screen. And Zalthor saw something in her expression that chilled his blood. She was smiling. High Commander, she replied. You sent Vethkal to demand our surrender and killed our people as a demonstration. Now we're demonstrating something in return. You have shipyards and military bases across multiple systems. Correct? Zalthor didn't respond. But his silence was answer enough. We've identified 47 high-value targets in your territory, Chen continued. This is just the first strike. Every time you threaten Earth, we'll destroy something you value. We don't need to match your numbers. Just need to make this war too expensive for you to continue behind her. Tanaka stepped into view of the camera. You wanted to make an example of us. The diplomat said. Instead, we're making an example of you. News of humanity's counterattack spread through the galactic community like a shockwave. The Zinthari Collective had ruled this sector for 3,000 cycles without serious challenge, now a species that couldn't even leave its own solar system 6 months ago had attacked their homeworld. Trade ships carried the story to every port communication. Arelas buzzed with speculation in markets and meeting halls across dozens of worlds. Species that had suffered under collective dominance watched events unfold with barely concealed hope. The Remnari were the first to act for 3 generations. They'd served as a labor class within the collective, their oceanic homeworld stripped of resources to feed the endless hunger of Zinthari expansion. Their representative, a being named Kalash, had been monitoring the situation from the collective's central trade hub. When news of the Zinthok Prime attack arrived, he immediately sent encrypted messages to resistance cells that had operated in secret for decades. The humans have proven the collective can be hurt. His message read, if they can strike the homeworld itself, then perhaps freedom is possible. Prepare for action within days. Remnari workers across 5-star systems began coordinated slowdowns and sabotage. Nothing overt enough to invite immediate retaliation, but enough to disrupt the collective's supply chains and military logistics. A shipment of weapons components bound for fleet assembly points. Mysteriously contaminated navigation data for supply convoys became corrupted automated systems and processing. Facilities began experiencing cascading failures. High Commander Zalthor found himself fighting fires on multiple fronts simultaneously. The armada he'd dispatched toward Earth sat in deep space awaiting orders. The humans had proven they could strike anywhere. So keeping his fleet concentrated near Earth seemed like inviting another attack on collective territory. But pulling the fleet back would signal weakness to other potentially rebellious species. Meanwhile, the High Council pressured him for decisive action. We cannot allow this human aggression to stand unpunished. Vethkal argued during an emergency session. Every species in our domain is watching. If we appear weak, we'll face rebellions everywhere. The Krell counselor disagreed. We're already facing rebellions. The Remnori incidents alone have cost us weeks of production, and reports suggest other species are preparing similar actions. The crystalline Vexnari representative chimed in with her species. Characteristic analytical precision. Our modeling suggests that prosecuting a full war against Earth will cost 38% of our military capacity and require 16 cycles to achieve total victory during that time. Subject species have a 72% probability of widespread revolt. The economic cost would be catastrophic. Zalthor listened to the debates with growing frustration. Collective had always operated on a simple principle: overwhelming. Force brought submission, but the humans had broken that equation. They'd proven that a weaker species could still impose unacceptable costs. Worse, they'd done it publicly enough that every other species in the sector now knew the collective was vulnerable on Earth. Secretary General Santos monitored the developing situation with a team of analysts working around the clock. Intelligence gathered from captured Zin-3 communications and from unexpected allies showed that the galaxy was in flux. We're receiving a message. Her communications officer announced, not from the collective, it's from someone called Kellish of the Remnari. The message that appeared on Santos's screen was brief but significant. Humans of Earth, we are the Remnari, a species enslaved by the Zin-3. For 80 of your years, your resistance has inspired us to resume our own fight for freedom. Oh, we lack your military capabilities, but we can provide intelligence on collective movements and logistics. We ask nothing in return except the hope that both our species might survive to see the collective's tyranny, and Santos showed the message to her Council General. Morrison was skeptical. Could be a trap. The collective might be using them to feed us false information. Dr. Okonkwo disagreed. The timing matches with reports we're seeing of disruptions in collective territory, and the Remnari have every reason to hate the Zin-3. Ambassador Tanaka, recently returned from the Zinthok Prime raid, spoke carefully. If we accept their help, we're not just fighting for Earth anymore, we're becoming part of a larger conflict. Santos considered this. The original goal had been simple: make the collective leave Earth alone, but the situation had evolved beyond that simple objective. Other species were looking to humanity as proof that resistance was possible. Accept the Remnari offer, Santos decided, and put out discreet feelers to any other species willing to share intelligence. We don't need formal alliances yet, just information. The network that formed over the following weeks was loose and informal, but it fundamentally changed the nature of the conflict. Trading guilds, officially neutral, began sharing convoy routes and scheduled scientific enclaves, passed along technical data. Even some collective species, particularly younger members of the Vexnari, leaked information about fleet movements and strategic planning. The galaxy's power structure, stable for millennia, was beginning to shift for the Zin-3. This development was more threatening than anything the humans had done militarily. If object species believed rebellion was possible, the entire collective could collapse. Zelther called a meeting with his most trusted advisors. Away from the factional politics of the High Council, we cannot defeat Earth militarily without destroying ourselves politically, he admitted, but we cannot negotiate from a position of weakness without encouraging further rebellions. We need a decisive victory that demonstrates collective power while minimizing cost. His chief strategist, a Vexnari named Silvara, who had served the collective loyally for centuries, analyzed the problem with crystalline clarity. We need to force the humans into a battle they cannot avoid and cannot win. She said, somewhere the galactic community will witness our victory clearly. Kepler Station, Zalthor said suddenly, the neutral trade hub at the sector's edge. Kepler Station was a massive structure built by the ancient precursor species and maintained by a coalition of trading guilds. It served as the primary marketplace and communication hub for this entire region of space. Thousands of ships docked there daily from hundreds of different species. It was also, Zalthor knew, where humanity had begun establishing diplomatic contacts with other species. If we threaten Kepler Station, he continued, the humans will have to respond. They've positioned themselves as defenders against our tyranny. They cannot allow us to destroy a neutral civilian target. Silvara saw the logic immediately, and when they arrived to defend it, we'll have concentrated our fleet for a decisive engagement, a battle witnessed by the entire galactic community. If we crush the human fleet there, we demonstrate our power while the humans appear weak for failing to protect their allies. The plan was sound, but it required committing significant. For Seshelthur would be gambling the collective's future on one engagement. If the humans somehow won or even fought to a costly draw, the political consequences would be devastating, but doing nothing was equally dangerous. The rebellions were spreading, production was declining. The collective's member species were beginning to question whether maintaining the empire was worth the cost. Assemble the fleet. Zalthar ordered all available warships Every reserve we can spare will make our stand at Kepler Station. Meanwhile, humanity continued its rapid technological advancement. Every day brought new innovations as scientists and engineers worked. With an urgency born of survival, the faster-than-light drives became more reliable, weapons improved as captured. Zin 3 technology was reverse-engineered and enhanced new ships joined the fleet as commercial vessels were converted and retrofitted. Commander Chen drilled her growing force relentlessly. The Terran retaliation fleet had expanded from 12 ships to a mix of military and civilian vessels united by their determination to defend Earth. We got lucky at Zinthok Prime, Chen told her officers. During one planning session, they weren't expecting us. Their defenses were weak. Next time they'll be ready. We need to be better. The intelligence from the Remnar and other sources proved. Invaluable human analysts began to understand collective military doctrine, their tactics, their weaknesses. Darrow Kunquo made a crucial discovery while analyzing battle data. The collective fights like an empire. He explained their tactics assume they're facing one enemy at a time. That they control the battlefield. Absolutely, they don't know how to handle fluid multi-front engagements if we can force them to fight on multiple vectors simultaneously. Their command structure breaks down. General Morrison incorporated this insight into humanity's developing strategy. We can't match their firepower ship to ship, he acknowledged, but we can be faster. It's more adaptable. We'll hit them from unexpected angles. Force them to divide their attention? The warning came 3 weeks after the Zinthok Prime raid. Kalish contacted Secretary General Santos directly with urgent news. The collective is assembling a massive fleet near Kepler Station. He reported over 800 warships. It's the largest concentration since the initial invasion force that was sent to Earth. They're planning something. Santos brought together her entire command staff. It's a trap, Ambassador Tanaka said immediately there. Using Kepler Station as bait, they know we've established contacts there. Kepler Station hung in the void like a massive wheel, its ancient precursor architecture gleaming under the light of a distant star. For centuries it had served as neutral ground where species from across the sector conducted trade, shared information, and resolved disputes without resorting to violence. Now, it sat in the crosshairs of the largest military confrontation the region had seen in generations. High Commander Zolther positioned his fleet in a deliberate formation around the Station 8, 100 Zin-3 warships arranged in concentric spheres, creating a layered defense that would force any attacker to fight through. Multiple kill zone should learn from the Zinthok Prime raid. This time there would be no surprise attacks. No undefended targets. Every approach vector was covered by overlapping fields of fire. His sensors detected the human fleet's arrival at the edge of the system 3 hours before visual contact. 47 ships. Just as intelligence predicted, they emerged from faster-than-light travel in a scattered formation. Immediately beginning evasive maneuvers. Elther allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The humans had come exactly as he'd planned now. He would destroy them while the galaxy watched. Commander Chen stood on the bridge of Terran Defiance, studying the tactical display with a calm that belied the desperate situation. 800 ships against 47B, any conventional measure. This was a slaughter waiting to happen, but Chen had no intention of fighting conventionally. All ships execute pattern chaos. She ordered the human fleet split into 7 groups, each taking wildly different approach vectors toward Kepler Station. Some dove below the ecliptic plane. Others accelerated to maximum speed, directly toward the Zin-3 Formation 3. Ships activated their weapons and began firing at extreme range. Drawing attention, the collective fleet responded exactly as Chen predicted. Their command structure, built on hierarchical decision-making and centralized control, struggled to adapt to multiple simultaneous threats. Alther's tactical officers called out contacts from different vectors, requesting orders should they concentrate fire on the fastest approaching ships, the ones already shooting, the groups trying to flank. Engage all targets as they enter range. Zolther commanded maintain formation integrity. Don't allow them to draw us out of position, but the humans had no intention of engaging the main fleet directly as Zin-3 ships oriented to fire on the approaching groups. Chen's real plan unfolded. 5 human vessels, traveling at maximum speed, shot past the outer defensive sphere before the collective could concentrate fire. They weren't attacking the Zin-3 fleet, They were heading directly for Kepler Station's Althor. Understood immediately if the humans reached the station. They could use it as cover, forcing the collective to either fire on a neutral civilian target or allow the humans to dictate the battlefield, intercept those ships. He ordered, "Don't let them reach the station, 50 Zinthri." Vessels broke formation to pursue the moment they did. Chen sprang the next phase of her trap, the remaining human ships, which had appeared to be scattering in confusion. Suddenly coordinated, they converged on the gap in the collective formation created by the pursuing ships. All vessels engage at will, Chen transmitted. Make every shot count. The battle became chaos. Human ships, smaller and more maneuverable than their Zinthri counterparts, wove through the enemy formation like fighters among bombers. They targeted specific systems weapons arrays, shield generators, engine clusters with precision born of months of studying captured technology. The collective ships had superior firepower and defenses, but they'd been designed for battles of dominance, ship-to-ship duels where both sides exchanged fire until one was destroyed. The humans didn't fight that way. They struck and evaded, concentrated fire on individual targets until shields failed, then moved to the next day. Zinthri cruiser exploded as 3 human ships focused their weapons on its reactor housing in. Another lost propulsion when railgun rounds severed its engine connections. Collective formation, optimized for covering approach vectors, became a liability when enemies were already inside its ships. Couldn't fire without risk of hitting their own forces' communication. Channels flooded with contradictory orders as local commanders tried to coordinate, without clear direction from Zalther. Meanwhile, the 5 ships racing toward Kepler Station encountered the pursuing collective vessels. The human ships were faster, but the Zinthri had the angle of approach. Commander Rodriguez aboard the destroyer, Indomitable, watched as enemy fire began to bracket his ship. Evasive pattern Delta, he ordered. His vessel twisted and rolled, but there were too many attackers. A plasma bolt struck the Indomitable's stern, vaporizing the aft shields and crippling one engine hull. Breach on decks 4 and 5, his damage control officer reported. We've lost maneuvering thrusters. Rodriguez made a decision. If they couldn't outrun the Zinthri, they'd buy time for the others. All power to forward shields, he commanded Helm. Turn us around. We're going to give them something to shoot at. The Indomitable spun on its axis. Now facing its pursuers, Rodriguez opened fire with everything his crippled ship possessed. The destroyer wouldn't survive, but every second the Zinthri spent destroying it was a second the other 4 ships gained. The Indomitable died bravely, taking 2 collective vessels with it before its reactor finally failed, but the sacrifice achieved its purpose. The remaining 4 human ships reached the Kepler Station. They didn't dock or hide behind it. Instead, they took up defensive positions and began broadcasting on all frequencies to all ships and stations. The lead captain transmitted, "We are here to prevent the collective from threatening this neutral facility. Kepler Station represents the principle of peaceful cooperation. We will defend that principle inside the station." Thousands of beings from dozens of species watched the battle unfolding around them. The station administrator, an elderly being from a species long since incorporated into the collective, made an unexpected decision: activate the station's defensive systems. He ordered his staff, "We're neutral." His second protested, "We were neutral," the administrator corrected, "but the humans came here to defend us, and some of them died doing it. The least we can do is help." Kepler Station had been built by the precursors, a species whose technology remained far beyond modern understanding. Most of the station's systems had been dormant for millennia, but the defensive arrays, designed to protect against pirates and asteroids, still functioned. Ancient weapons platforms activated around the station's perimeter. They weren't powerful enough to threaten the collective fleet, but they added their fire to the human defensive positions. Althor watched this development with growing alarm. If a neutral station was actively supporting the humans, the political implications would be devastating. Every species in the sector would see it as an endorsement of Earth's position. He needed to end this quickly. "All ships, full assault," he commanded. "Destroy the human fleet. Collateral damage to the station is acceptable." It was a mistake born of desperation the moment those orders went out on collective communication channels. They were intercepted and recorded by dozens of ships and stations across the system. The Remnari, listening on their secret channels, immediately began broadcasting the order across the sector, the Zinthri Collective. The self-proclaimed defenders of order and civilization had just authorized an attack on the galaxy's most important neutral territory. The battle around Kepler Station intensified. Human ships fought with desperate courage, knowing they were buying time not just for themselves, but for every species watching. The Terran Defiance lost shields and then armor commander. Chen directed damage control teams while continuing to coordinate the fleet's defense around her. The ship groaned and shuddered under enemy fire. 3 more human vessels were destroyed then for more. The Collective was winning through sheer numbers, but they were paying a terrible price for every human ship destroyed. 2 or 3 Zinthri vessels were disabled or destroyed. The humans had learned to fight smart. To maximize every advantage, they used the station's structure as cover. They coordinated their fire with devastating precision. They sacrificed damaged ships in ramming attacks when all other options were exhausted. Though battle raged for 3 days, at the end of the first day, the human fleet was reduced to 29 ships. By the end of the second, 17 remained on the third day, with only 9 human vessels still capable of fighting. Zoltharu's own ship took critical damage. A coordinated strike by 4 human vessels overwhelmed the flagship's shield's railgun rounds, punctured the hull. Secondary explosions rippled through the command deck. Zolthar found himself being evacuated to a support vessel, his fleet in disarray around him. The Collective had lost over 300 ships, so another 200 were damaged on. Still the humans fought. It was the Krell counselor who finally transmitted from Zinthok Prime, overriding Zolthar's command authority. Ceasefire. The order came: all Collective vessels cease fire immediately. This battle is over. In the sudden silence that followed, Commander Chen surveyed what remained of her fleet. 9 ships, all damaged, many barely functional, but they were still there, still defending Kepler Station. The communication channel opened, and a new voice spoke, not Zolthar, but a member of the High Council itself. Humans of Earth, the Krell counselor began. We request formal negotiations to end this conflict. We will withdraw our forces from Kepler Station.